All right, everyone, we're going to start. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. I'm going to start with attendance. Okay, I didn't know we weren't set up. Good evening. We're going to give it a minute until Melissa sets up. We are running 2 minutes late, so if anyone watching, we apologize, and for the audience, we apologize. I'm like a stickler on time, so. Oh, there is a plug over there. If I run out of juice, I'm just going to.
We're going to be looking at creating more.
We need one more minute.
Same too, Razi.
Should I go like this?
Those it.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
We're looking to create more coverage, presence around the state. Because just those two are to be safe.
There's not very many people here. We're really like, I think you can see everybody.
Well, I don't, yeah, if I can see this silhouette, I'm okay. But I
Yeah,
can't see
it
this
has been, and that's why the secretary asked me to help out with the homes. Bob Engel, Robert Engel. Yeah, he's the head guy. And he's a holdover from the old administration.
Yeah.
We're,
Yeah, it was great.
I'm doing what I can to help
The
out.
whole family, there were 18 of us. We did cruise and then we
We're looking to create a lot more effective
had
platforms.
two events. Last night.
We have some.
Back to back. So I do that every couple of choices cafe. Yeah. Just return to chaos. And I have 3 days.
Well, that, yeah. So we're going to be, we want to be that long. We're in the process of working on it. Got a lot of work. A lot of work.
You doing great for the veterans at all?
I am. I'm loving
Glad.
it.
My father was a veteran.
Outstanding.
Yes, so
Great. What branch?
he was in the Army. He was in World War II after the war.
Wow. That's great. The Occupation Army.
Yes, it was very exciting. He has all these
Wow,
pictures. I have all these pictures now of him all over, like Germany and in my
awesome.
cabinet. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I was Army as well. So I'd like to hear more about Dad's.
Melissa, are we ready? We are all ready. That's fine. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining. Thank you for those in the audience that are joining. We're going to start with attendance. We're competing with a little movie in the background. I don't know if we can hear that, but so Jennifer Wadlin here, obviously. David Cunningham.
Present.
Julia Flaherty.
Here.
Peter Herbst.
Here.
Amy Holmes.
Here.
Justine Wong.
Here.
Thomas Kent.
Here.
Shelley North.
Here.
Elizabeth Page.
Here.
Counselor Reynolds.
Here.
Raina Rubin.
Here.
Okay, and we'll open the meeting with any member and staff announcements.
It's from staff tonight, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. And then I want to recognize those who are joining us from Town Council. It looks like Councilor Reynolds and Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Bo Ricky. Thank you. Am I missing anyone? I don't see it. Okay. Okay, and then on the planning board, from the planning board, we've invited the planning board as well, and we have already on the board Thomas Kent, so thank you for joining, and Kim Crowa, the acting chair, and oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking right at you, and I'm literally looking right at you, and Bill Grove. Thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. I don't see anyone else. Am I missing anyone else? Okay. Appreciate it. Appreciate you all attending. And we're going to have a presentation from Jen I think what we want to do before then, though, is an election of a vice chair. If anyone would like to nominate anyone for a vice chair position. Justine?
Yes, I'm Justine. Would like to nominate Amy to be the vice chair position. She has been a small business in town, small business owner, and I think she's well representing the towns for this perspective.
And do we have a, do I go to any other, or do I go to a second? Okay. Are there any further nominations?
Well, you need to ask the nominee if they consent.
Oh. Do you consent to the nomination?
I will consent.
Okay. And are there any other nominations? Okay, if there's only one nomination, do I have a second motion to nominate Amy Holmes as the new vice chair? We have a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the motion carries, and Amy, welcome. Okay. Congratulations. Great. Okay, so then we were going to do the presentation now and discussion on ideas and strategies shortlist. I'm going to turn it over to Jen Golson.
Great, thank you so much. I'm Jen Goldson, planning consultant. So tonight is the finalization of phase 3, which is a great milestone. And after this, we'll talk about what happens next. But I just wanted to remind you of the work that you've been doing really since January. I have the schedule up on the screen. Where we started out talking through metrics and goals and planned for what we called the technical working sessions. Then my consulting team did a brainstorm to get you started on strategies in January. In February, we presented those, and RKG and Kittleson, the sub-consultants that we're working with, were here to answer questions, and we did some Q&A. Then we held these technical working sessions, which you all were part of, and probably many people who are sitting in the audience today as well, where we looked at strategy ideas for every core theme, and people had very in-depth discussions. Along the same time as that, you all were running roadshows, where you went out to various boards and commissions and committees and organizations, and through all of that, we got a bunch of data that we analyzed, gave to you. You did another questionnaire to kind of answer some of the middling questions, things that fell in the middle, and then to advocate for things that maybe were lower than you hoped, or demote things that you thought were higher than you hoped, and that's what we did at the last meeting. And so I'm just breezing through here. So our last meeting was June 15th. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, in May we also ran a department managers working session to have the department managers just help us to understand their capacity and where they had any capacity issues or other concerns, or particularly felt strongly about some ideas as well. And so we included that all in your materials for last time. And so last time what we did was in May, what we did was we reviewed all of that data, we reviewed the questionnaire that you all did as pre-work to that meeting, and then we had a lengthy discussion about what should we include in this short list and what shouldn't we, and then also what should we change the way we worded. And so the handout that we gave you last week reflects what we understood the takeaways to that discussion to be, with a couple of areas that we highlighted where there was no clear resolution yet. And so we wanted to make sure that you had a chance to talk through those tonight to see if we could get some resolution on those areas highlighted in yellow. They're just, I think, a couple of those areas. And so the next step after this, just so you can see where we are in this process, as we enter phase 4, we take all of the work that you've done, the vision, the goals, the strategies, and we start to really lay out this plan. And so the very next meeting that we have with you will be actually in August. Sorry, this is a little bit, I think I pulled up the wrong schedule. Sorry about that. I pulled it up from my hard drive. So I'm just going to talk from memory because I actually know what's next. So in August, when we meet with you, I think it's on the 17th, we'll be looking at a bunch of different options for how you want this plan laid out. We have a bunch of different graphic mechanisms that we use, and we can decide on how you want to visualize this plan. Some of you may be like, well, I don't really care what it looks like as long as it says what I want it to say, and that's fair. But other people really want to, roll up their sleeves and affect the design of the plan as well. I think the design is important, at least in our perspective, because it's a way to communicate all the work that you've done, but it's also a way to really reach folks that may not sit through a 200-page document, but if they get this, very well-designed, concise master plan that's very graphic, they're much more likely to take in what these priorities are. So that's why we focus on the design so much. So that will be your next meeting. Now, that doesn't mean there's no chance to change anything. Things can be changed at any point in time, but after tonight, we're hoping that we'll pretty much know what's going to be in the plan. I'm sure there'll be some tweaks from tonight's discussion, but generally we want to walk out of this meeting with an understanding of what strategies will be in the plan. We also just want to remind you that there are still some inconsistencies in the goals. Now that we have a short list of strategies, we want to go back through the goals and make them more concise and pull out anything that ended up just being a strategy idea. So you'll see in the next version after tonight, and we can talk about any other changes you want to the goals and the vision tonight, now that we have a short list of strategies. But you'll see that my team will also work on clarifying, consolidating, and just refining those goals so that we're not being so repetitive with what ended up being in the strategies. So those are the next steps. So just as a reminder, what we have right now is an overall community vision, which I've read to you many times. I'm not going to read it again to you. It's on the screen. It really hasn't changed, at least not that much, in the past few months. There may have been some wordsmithing things here or there, but you've largely seen what this has said over the last few months. And then we worked on these core themes. So there are 5 core themes. There's a theme around conservation, preservation, and social vitality. That's the first one. There's a theme on economic development and supporting local businesses. That's the second theme. The third theme is really related to transportation safety and connectivity. The fourth theme is regarding residential neighborhoods as well as housing options. And then the fifth theme is really improving and expanding town facilities, services, and infrastructure. And I'm not going to go through word for word, but what I thought I'd do is scroll through each core theme so that you can just be reminded of the way we've worded the vision statement for each, each core theme has its own vision statement. It's usually about 2 paragraphs long or a few sentences. And so this is the vision statement here for conservation, preservation, and social vitality. And you can see here that it talks a lot about conservation of water, natural resources, protecting open space, strengthening climate resilience, and we also have woven in historic preservation and preserving historic resources in addition to social vitality. Looking at your community as part of its sustainability is not just about the environment, but also about those connections and support that you all give to each other. So that's what this core theme is mostly about. And within that theme right now, there are 13 goals. In the next iteration, you'll see that we can pare some of these down. Some of them are a little repetitive, and some of them also have become strategies. So this one, when you see it next, I don't think you're going to see 13 goals. And then we have 16 strategy ideas. And you can see that they have a variety of types of ideas. Some deal more with capital improvements or buying, even buying land or protecting land in other ways. Some deal with more town practices, the way public buildings are built, and some are more around policies and regulations. And so there's all sorts of ideas. I'm scanning through, I'm going a little slow here so folks can just skim a little bit and refresh their memory, because I'm not going to bore you with reading every single one here. And then you'll see, so there are 16 strategies in this area, and that includes some that you added. So we added this additional strategy, I think through our last meeting, with the strategy about the Historical Society. So then if you go down to core theme 2, this one is focused on economic development and supporting local businesses and your business areas and the vitality of your business areas. So for this one, we have a kind of a shorter vision, a one-sentence vision here that I know we worked on a lot with you around the specific wording. And then we have 7 goals. And the goals then basically gave us the direction for how to build the strategies. And so we have strategies, there are 15 strategies in this area. And again, as you'll see in all of them, we have a variety of types of things. Some are capital improvements, some are, in this case, some is beautification and streetscape improvements, and really investing in those business areas. Some has to do with zoning and how to attract different types of commercial uses and businesses. Some have to do with supporting local business owners, and so you'll see that we have a variety of ideas here. Now, one thing you should know as we're going through this, I don't view a master plan as a blueprint. In many ways, I view it as a menu that you will try lots of things over the next decade. Some of them will work, some of them won't pass, some of them you'll bring to city council, or town council, and it won't pass. Some of them you'll won't be able to get funding for. And so those ideas end up dropping away, but your vision and your goal remain constant for the next 10 years. And the idea here is we start you off with lots of ideas, but your implementation committee, as they track this very closely, after a few years, they might start to pivot and say, okay, this set of ideas isn't working, can't get funding, can't get approval, whatever the issue is. We're going to pivot. We also know now there's new grant funding available that the state has made, or new federal funding for different initiatives, or maybe there is other technology that we didn't anticipate when we first wrote this plan. So that implementation committee will be working to update this so that you're still trying to meet your goals, you're still trying to achieve that vision, but there are lots of different ways to do that. So that's how I want you to view this list of strategies. All right. And then if you keep going down, we've also, in this area and some other areas, we've combined ideas and we've added some ideas. And those are things that we talked about last time and you saw last time. Core theme 3 is about the transportation safety as well as connectivity of the town. And so we have 5 goals here, and we have 15 strategies. And again, these have a variety of types of ideas here, and I'm just going to keep skimming down. Some of them deal with studies to try to understand things better, like cut-through traffic patterns. Some of them deal with other things like designated truck routes, sidewalk clearing, etc. So you see there's a whole variety here. And then in core theme 4, we talk about residential neighborhoods and housing options. And you'll see, I know you all worked very hard on this statement, and we went around and around at exactly what this vision statement should say for residential neighborhoods and housing options. I think of all the core themes, this is probably the one we spent the most energy trying to get right with you. There are 4 goals here. And then there are 22 strategy ideas, and there's a real variety of ideas here. Some, again, deal with zoning quite a bit in this area. Some deal with other public placemaking solutions, and you'll see as you scan through all the different types of ideas here. And then core theme 5 is about your public facilities, services, and infrastructure. And this is really mostly focused on a theme of both expanding and modernizing. And you'll see here that there are 5 goals, and then there are 22 strategy ideas. And then the next step, these strategy ideas, as they get incorporated into the master plan, which you'll, start to develop over the next few meetings. Once we get these, this master plan basically designed, and you've seen a few different versions of it, we're going to start to work on something that we call the strategy matrix. The action plan matrix. It's actually a spreadsheet that the implementation committee and staff will be in charge of maintaining, and it's going to tell you what department is in charge of this strategy. Is there a department that supports it, a department that's a lead? What are some possible funding sources for each strategy idea that would cost money? And we'll give you ideas in terms of other grant programs, state, federal funding. Community Preservation Act can fund a number of these ideas, and other things would come from your capital budget. Other things would come from your operating budget. So there's a real variety of funding mechanisms. We can also look at public-private partnerships potentially for some of them. So we're going to work with our whole sub-consultant team to give you lots of ideas for potential funding sources. And we'll also give you a sense of sequencing. So we'll look at the next 10 years and think about what are things that you could do in year 1 and year 2 to kind of lay the foundation for the rest of the decade. What are some things maybe that you're already started or starting to work on? Those are ideal for the early years. And then what are things that maybe need a lot more study or are going to be big ticket items that are going to take a while to figure out if you can afford? Maybe those end up being in year, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's what that spreadsheet is all about. And the reason that we give you an Excel spreadsheet is because we do look at that action plan as something that you update consistently. Your implementation committee will meet, multiple times per year, look at that spreadsheet, make sure they know what has been done, what hasn't been done, and they'll keep it. We recommend that it's kept as a public document on the town website and consistently updated so that every member of the public knows where you are in the process of implementing. And if something doesn't work, like I said before, you might not get approval for everything. You might not get funding for everything. In fact, you're almost guaranteed not to. So then what happens? You start to change that matrix, but the goals and the vision remain the same. So does that make sense the way I described that? I just wanted to give you a sense of where you're going from here. We really only have a few months left to work with you, and I just wanted to make sure that you all kind of knew those next steps. And that's it. I'm not going to go through every single strategy here, but I'm happy to leave this up because I know that you'll be taking comments, and you may want to go back and talk about those yellow highlighted ones, which I just skimmed through very quickly. But they were, here, and I'm happy to scroll back to those when we're ready. The only other thing that, and this is new for you, this meeting, we created, as part of the plan, and I can zoom in on this too, as part of the plan, we create what we call a future land use map, and it gives you an idea of some of these strategies are not spatial, but some of them are, and if we can map strategy ideas, we put them on the map. So you'll see, for example, that the yellow splotches are the areas, your business areas that you'd like to see improvements, beautification, investment. You can see that these these orange areas, we're calling them transformation areas. That includes the South Shore Plaza, places that see potential for improvements maybe on a bigger scale from what's there. You can also see the river walk that we've optimistically put in as a pretty well-connected river walk, much bigger than it is now. And then you'll see these purple areas, which are all what we're calling neighborhood preservation areas, where really we heard very clearly that these are very precious to the community. You're really not looking for a lot of change. You're looking to preserve the characteristics of those neighborhoods that you love. And then we've also identified some multimodal improvement areas. And I think those are the main pieces. Oh, and some bike ped improvement areas too. And then, of course, how could I forget lands of interest or protection areas, which largely relate to your open space plan and what has been identified. So that's your future land use map. As we change the strategies, if any major changes happen tonight, we would reflect that on the map. And I think that Melissa and the planning division and I'm not sure the mayor as well, wanted to just make some tweaks to this. And so I don't know if you want to go over that now or if you want to. Yeah.
Could I use the screen, Madam Chair?
Please.
Okay, and I do have a handout in everyone's packet of the changes.
Melissa, if I could just interrupt, Justine had a question.
Just want to ask a question about this map. Would it consider the neighborhood town? So for me, as the South Shore Plaza, actually closer to go to Quincy Adams versus Braintree Station.
In terms of public transportation? Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we had a strategy in here talking about connectivity from Braintree Station, but you're saying we have good connectivity in Quincy Adams already. So we could talk about that strategy if you want to change it.
Raina has a question. Sorry, Melissa.
No, that's okay.
No, the purple is neighborhood preservation areas.
Okay, 'cause-
So it's basically all your existing residential neighborhoods.
No, the
Oh.
dark purple.
Oh,
The
okay.
dark
That
purple, it
like
didn't quite fit the key. in
that
it.
like magenta.
Magenta,
Yeah.
excuse me, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. It is a little confusing, isn't it? I am looking at those, I believe, as the if I'm looking at this right, I think they're the open space areas. They have the green around. I don't know why the middle looks magenta. That's not even showing up on our legend. I think that's a mistake. But you can see that all of those are also outlined in green. So
Yes.
I think that those are all the lands of interest and protection for basically open space lands.
And that includes the RMV parking lot? Am I looking at it right? Well, you'll go through it. Go through it. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, Melissa, please.
And I do have a copy of this in everyone's packet so they can follow along. The first item that I've noted here is the number one, when we highlight the Wood Road area. Myself, Mayor Corus, and our chief of staff, Margaret LaForest, did a kickoff meeting a couple weeks ago, and we're going to be doing some, we're looking to partner with MAPC to do some rezoning and transformation and upgrade in this particular area targeted to life science. And we've also included the area of Braintree Office Park and where 5 is, where Pier 1 is, and where Longitude is going in, the former Bonton site. So, as shown here, I've just tried to extend area number one, and I colored that area in orange. The second thing that I've highlighted on this plan is this area here, and that is the Armstrong Court property. And while there definitely is a portion of that associated with the removal of the dam in the river walk that we do see starting here for preservation and conservation, this site is going to 99.9% be in our MBTA overlay district. So that particular piece should be revised to a transformation area. The third item that I've highlighted is, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll start over. Just for those at home, and I apologize to BCAM, the first extension or modification on the proposed land use map is to incorporate the Braintree Hill Office Park along with the areas on North Street and along Granite Street, sort of north of 93, I guess you could describe that as, on the northwestern border. So to expand area number one. The second item was the Armstrong Court property, RMV parking lot. While we do have the Riverwalk project or the Manatequit Dam removal project actually going to be starting very, very soon,
There's also going to be redevelopment in this area as part of our MBTA zoning district. So looking to change that to a transformation area. The third piece that we've identified is the St. Thomas More piece. And I know there's been different discussions and desires from the community. That piece of property is under purchase and sales, and we have been having fairly active discussions. I know Councilor Reynolds is also involved with those discussions. So to change that one to a transformation area. And then just looking at the map, I have a question mark, just trying to understand, and obviously the scale on this map is very small, this green area, and I think that green area is supposed to be the area behind the Braintree Auto area. And I think we just need to make sure that that's lining up correctly. I know that had come up at the last meeting. We were discussing that area as well. And there's quite a few pieces of land in that back area. So that's in your packet. And we would be having the consultant make these changes just sort of based on some things that we've already started and things that are in the works so that we don't have conflict with what's already going on in this map here.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Shelley?
Melissa, just to clarify, the Braintree Auto area, is that by where the CVS is, by Archie's? Is that what you're talking about? Is that,
It's behind it.
okay, like by the bridge, right there?
No, no, behind the Braintree, before you get up that far.
Okay.
So just past, so your block on one side, then Nancy, then this. The land all behind that, all that woods behind that. I think that's what we're targeting with
Got it,
this.
okay, so, okay, yep.
Liz? Liz, which area are we talking about?
You know where six? Come up the top of stores, take a left, right? Then you get Nails by Nancy, right? Then you have the massage building, and then you have that Braintree Auto building.
Yes.
And then the Success Realty building. The woods behind there, that's what you're talking about?
It kind of goes from the houses behind stores all the way over to there. This was actually what you were talking about at the last meeting,
Right.
Liz. And I just wanted to make sure that's what, it looks a little bit out of place on the map, but no, understanding that area, Connor and I were looking at our GIS map, that's really the only thing that's not developed over there. So I'm assuming that's what we were targeting for preservation, just outside of Braintree Square.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And that's
I think I
correct.
have it up on this map now, if you can see that. I think, is it, Melissa, we're talking about this area, I think, right?
Correct.
Here's Braintree Auto. Yeah, there's Nails Spa by Nancy, it says here, but I assume that's the same thing you're talking about.
Yes,
So that's for preservation, not transformation?
Yeah.
correct.
And also a question on the two magenta in the southeast corner. One looks as on Liberty Street, one's off of Grove Street. What,
So the one that's on Liberty is the St. Clair's Church,
Yeah.
and there's quite a bit of land behind that as well. And then the one that's closer to Weymouth is the wet area that is part of Banner Park but not being developed.
okay,
High tension wires, if you're going up Grove
Yeah.
before you get to the entrance of Columbia and you kind of, Columbian and you look out, it's that area.
okay. Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. The reservoir is in magenta. Am I seeing that wrong? Why would that be in magenta?
Reservoirs in magenta.
Preservation.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to look back. I think the open space plan that we drew this from, these.
No, that's the 21 acres. That's not the reservoir.
Oh, okay.
It's not the reservoir?
No,
Okay.
the reservoir's next to it in blue.
Okay, it looks like it's going into it. Okay.
Yeah, no, the reservoir's in blue, and then that is all of the land that is essentially the 21 acres.
Okay. Tom, did you have a question? Oh, Raina?
I'm all set.
Ivory Street corridor area, I thought that extended all the way down to Plain. I mean, shouldn't that go all the way to Plain Street? Because I remember when MAPC was holding meetings, it actually went past Pearl Street all the way down.
Okay.
It kind of links together, I thought. Ooh.
So making that connection just to the next intersection, essentially?
Yeah, to Plain, and that goes by the restaurants and all that.
I'm sorry, so you said down to where?
Plain, past the railroad track, where it ends, where John Mahar Highway will end
Okay, I see.
at Plain.
If I could make a reminder, if you're talking in your microphone and there's no like real sound coming out, that means that nobody at home can hear you. And so if you could just like wait a second until you get that sound, because I think we can be frustrating for our friends at Belt. So if you could just be mindful of that, because last meeting, because it went on so long, it was frustrating for probably people at home and maybe the Bell team, so. So do we next want to review it? So we already kind of went through all the strategies, but I think that we should open it up for anyone if they had an issue with a specific strategy, a change to a specific strategy, if it's not represented properly, if it's not well written, whatever it is that you want to address with a specific strategy. If there's any of that, why don't we don't have to go around like we typically do, but if anyone has anything, why don't we just bring them forward now? Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you. I just want to be clear what it is that we're commenting on, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we came up, and in this packet is the short list of strategies that have been talked about at the last meeting that we've kind of honed in on, right? So that's what we have to work with now. So in that list of strategies, if you take exception to one, or you want the wording changed, if you don't feel good about it, then bring it forward so that we can put it on the table now. We went through the whole 4-hour drill of going over every single strategy, so I don't think anyone wants to I think Meredith might want to, but I don't know that anybody wants to go through that again. But honestly, if you have something with respect to a strategy that you don't like, now's the time. Okay.
I would like to ask, just if I could, I have a couple
Please.
of questions.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm looking at core theme number 4, and this is more of a clarification I'm seeking. And that's item number 1, and specifically other incongruent land uses. I'll read the whole thing so I can put it in proper context. Creating and enhancing land use policies that protect neighborhoods, community members, and the environment from the impacts of commercial and other incongruent land uses. So is there a I'm sorry? Yes, that's core theme number 4.
Oh, so you're
Item
on the
number
vision?
1.
Are you
He's
on
on
the
the goal.
vision, or are you on a strategy?
He's on a goal. Yep.
On the goal, okay, all right.
Right.
Go ahead.
You
Sorry.
got it. Sorry about that. Okay. So is these 4 items that fall under core theme number 4, we're not commenting on those, we're commenting then on the short list strategies specifically?
Exactly.
Yeah, can I just offer, if people want to look at the goals, I'm open to that, but I also know that many of the goals, not so much in this strategy, but, not so much in this core theme, but in core theme 1 in particular, really need to be consolidated, and some removed because they turned into strategies. But I think that if there are some language clarifications, like what is meant by incongruent land uses, that's fair to talk about at tonight's meeting, but Chair Wadley, I don't know if you want them to just focus on the strategies now and talk about goals later.
Well, I feel like we're here, so if there's something that you don't like in there,
More of
Counselor Reynolds?
this is a question.
Yeah, I feel like that if we're here, so here we are, so if there's something you don't like in a goal that, or if there's something that you want to bring forward, I think we just might as well hash it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. It's just, I see clarification on item number 1. Is this, this statement in the way that it is written, are we talking about current zoning in terms of, 'cause we do have zones in the town that I know that we have looked at in the past and tried to make zoning changes, but they didn't fly. And I'm just curious if these are these specifically zoned areas to say that there's a commercial zone or a business zone or that may be adjacent to Res B or Res C, et cetera? Just a clarification
I think
on
the
that.
goal could translate to some zoning, but it could also translate to purchasing buffer areas or other conservation mechanisms to, provide a buffer between residential neighborhoods and other land uses. So I think it's both, and in the strategies, I think we have a few different ideas for how to do that. The first strategy, 4A, gets at that. Explore the acquisition of wooded areas in residential neighborhoods to preserve buffers from incompatible uses. And then I think there are also some zoning ideas. But that goal is, could be both zoning or other measures like purchasing land.
And the definition of incongruent in terms of the context of this statement.
Yeah.
How would one interpret that?
I mean, I think it could be more clear, but I would say it would be commercial, industrial, or other higher intensity residential land uses that are significantly higher in density than the residential area that
So if we have
we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so if you've got a Res C area next to a Res B or a Res A, how is that defined as incongruent? Is it I know you mentioned density.
We talked a little bit about buffers at the last meeting, and I think that it was clear that the town already had a number of buffers in place, if I'm remembering that discussion correctly. I don't know that it would affect those two residential districts in particular.
Okay, so that's helpful. I appreciate that clarification. Again, as we go through these guidelines of a master plan, that truly what will, legally dictate uses or changes, legal changes would be the zoning changes themselves. Would you agree?
I think that, I guess I would say that the master plan in Massachusetts won't legally dictate, just because of the way the statute's written.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you were to follow through with any of the zoning ideas in here, then the town council could decide.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That helped. Thank you, Madam President. I do have one other question. Item number 2, again, core theme 4, item number 2, the carefully considering a diverse range of well-designed and compatibly scaled housing options that are supported by the community, including age-restricted housing, veterans housing, service-enriched housing, and smaller single-family accessible starter homes. I've been looking for other areas here of documentation about the fact that the region that we live in the greater Boston area, we have numerous references to how we want to promote and attract life sciences, biomed, commercial uses to help in our revenue generation located in the right areas, of course. But one of the things that I don't see in this document is acknowledgement of the fact that those industries are in jeopardy right now, and there's numerous studies out there for the simple fact their number one reason is lack of a variety of housing inventory. And we are missing a variety of inventory here. It's incomplete as far as I'm concerned. That doesn't mean that I'm advocating for us to promote a dense city-like community, by no means. However, businesses are not coming. There's decisions that have been made already by many industries that are here, that have been traditional industries, not to invest in this area any longer because of the fact of the lack of housing inventory, the expense of the housing in our inventory. I think we as a community have to at least acknowledge that that is a problem. And in the master plan, I believe that we should be able to have some language somewhere that acknowledges that that is not something that we're here to eliminate or to deny, but to at least keep our minds open from an economic health standpoint. And as we look down the road, so that's the end of my point there. And
Madam Chair, may I make a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. In response to Member Reynolds' comments and concerns, and we had talked about this earlier in the process, that the timing of things and the timing of the MBTA requirements, we were not going to address that in the master plan because they're essentially parallel tracks. We're going to be finishing up at the time that we need to make some adoptions. So the MBTA zoning will allow for some of the things that you're concerned about not being in this community. And putting that zoning in place is likely going to trigger some investment and some interest. We've already had quite a bit of interest about Armstrong Cork. There's some other sites along that corridor as well that we're starting to get some calls about. I mean, it's no secret that we are a rapid transit community, and the development community is aware of that. So I think that while we don't specifically hone in on that style of housing in the master plan here, there will be other tools in the community and, quote, on the books in our zoning that will provide for that lack of housing in the community.
if I could, through the chair, please.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. That's very helpful, understanding that this is a working model that we're dealing with here. Having that additional documentation at the time of publication a few months down the road would be extremely helpful from my perspective. So if it's going to be addressed in other areas, similar to the way that you've just explained that, I'm satisfied. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, does anyone else have any issues or any concerns with anything that is currently written? Liz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we go to section 2, core theme 2, excuse me, item number 2, R's and Ralph, eliminate all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels. The original way this was written contained much more verbiage, and I went back and I watched it on the video, and it was not cut back to this degree per our last discussion, and it should read, no, core theme number 2.
Excuse me, can we just recognize speakers, Madam Chair, and not have the back and forth? That will help.
Okay, Liz, continue.
This is core theme 2, strategy, shortlist strategy 2R. The way it is written in the shortlist is much shorter than the way it was written that we described at the last meeting. Somehow it was, I think it was inadvertently cut short. I went back and I watched the video of the meeting, and it should read, eliminate all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels, taking care to mitigate the impact of uses incompatible with residential uses and to preserve and expand protective buffers. And that is what we discussed at the last meeting. So somehow,
Could you just say that again? Taking care to?
okay, the way in the comments, if you look at the comment area, comment EZ27, that is commenting on shortlist item 2, R's and Ralph, the very first sentence that ends with expand protective buffers. Are you
I
seeing-
don't have that in front of me, but if you
Oh,
could just
okay.
say what you said, I'll
Sure,
type it up.
I'll repeat it.
Taking care to,
I'll repeat, starting from the beginning.
Oh, it's in the packet that I
Eliminate all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels, taking care to mitigate the impact of uses incompatible with residential uses, and to preserve and expand protective buffers, period.
Thank you, Liz. Actually, that's how I remember it too. But does anyone have an issue with that? Sitting,
Can I ask a question? So we actually have something that we're looking at now, that's on Granite Street, and it's a commercial property, and the whole strip in front of this particular property is zoned Res B. So the front's Res B, the back's commercial, everything around it is commercial, and everything is used as commercial. So where are we expanding these buffers? I think the split lot discussion is getting a little, I don't know, and I'm concerned that people don't like truly understand what we mean when we're talking about these situations, because most of the things that we're looking at are, I mean, again, this is along Granite Street. It's everything around it is commercial, and those that aren't aware, the town, way back in the 50s, went along Granite Street and zoned these strips in front of all the commercial areas, in front of Bay State Drive, in front of all of these areas that are Res B. People probably don't even know that's Res B. So where would these buffers be when this property that's all zoned, all used as commercial, or most of it is used as commercial now, if that was to be all commercial, where would this buffer be?
okay, so we appreciate your feedback, but I think the committee wants to speak. Julie, can I let Julia go next?
I have a question just pertaining to this. So clearly split lots have been a problem in Braintree. It pops up as an issue right periodically. And at present, we have a process, or is there a process that you have in mind or a process that we have in place that would be used to determine these split lot, like how the lots would be resolved in the zoning so that they're no longer split? Like, what would the process be? What would the considerations be? How would the decisions be made? Who makes the decisions? That process is what I'm interested in right now.
So currently in the ordinance, section 135-306 is our split lots. And there's provisions in there that say if the least restrictive part is within 150 feet of the zone line, then you can use that lot for the least restrictive zoning. Now the question becomes least restrictive from use or least restrictive from setbacks. It does talk a little bit about use in that particular section. Some properties don't meet that because maybe it's over 150 feet. Maybe it's two lots that have never been combined but have been used as a site for God knows how long. We have quite a bit of those too. We try to encourage people to eliminate those internal lot lines. And what the bylaw says is that that lot needed to be in that configuration in 1940. So it's somewhat archaic. There are some properties that comply with that, and then there's some that don't.
But this calls for eliminating all instances of split zoning.
So that would be rezoning those parcels.
Rezoning. So can you describe your vision for how that process would go?
The rezoning process?
Just for the split lots. You would look at a parcel with a split lot. Who would look at it? What would the considerations be, and how would the decision be made?
We would probably run a GIS program to determine all lots that were split.
What's a GIS
Come up-
program?
It's a geographic information systems. It's like what the GIS is based on, so we could analyze. Yep. So we could analyze what's split, and then we would have an inventory of these parcels, what their zones are. We would look at those particular parcels. We would look at the surrounding area, and then make an evaluation of does this make sense? Is everything around there being used commercially? Are these properties already extending historically non-conforming into the Residence B areas? So we would evaluate them, you know, I don't want to say, probably individually, case by case, but they're in clusters. You know, they're in clusters. The example that I had given today is the Granite Street part south of Five Corners.
When you say we, who is that? Do you mean the planning department?
Yeah, it would need to be filed with, the council would be the one that would approve it.
On a case-by-case basis?
No, it would be a zoning amendment. It would be a map amendment. We would package it up and submit that as a map amendment to clean that up.
And then the council could sit with the planning department and say, why did you construe it in this particular way for this plot?
We would include that in us, if we were coming forward with an amendment to rezone a parcel, just like we do with all other rezones, we would have supporting information as to why. Typically, we do rezones now, it's for a development reason, typically. And in those particular situations, we have concept plans showing what would be done with the particular property. So we wouldn't just submit a map with a bunch of changes with no backup as to, you know, this particular area has been used for commercial since 1950. There are no houses near here. This makes sense. The exercise would be based on an attempt to match the zoning with the current land use.
Okay, and as you did that, would there be recourse for abutters, specific abutters, not the town generally, but specific abutters who would be impacted by that decision to weigh in with,
It's all public hearings, yeah. There's public hearings at the planning board and there's public hearings at the council. It's a very public process.
but it sounds like it would be a public hearing to discuss a broad change that would impact many parcels of land, potentially in different ways, depending on each parcel of land. So before we reached that point, would there be a means for abutters to weigh in with their concerns on the decision-making process?
Sure. If I'm advised to undertake something like this, in the future, we would spell out a process to try to, there's different areas that, and maybe thinking about it, taking on the whole town at once might be a little bit, you know, aggressive, from both an outreach standpoint and really trying to understand who will be at an advantage and who could potentially be at a disadvantage. But thinking about these, and this particular one that I'm thinking about now, again, it's all commercial, and everybody around there is all commercial.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Could we include that, Pete? So I think that's a great suggestion, but I think people get concerned when there's like broad strokes. I think
well, again,
that's what you're getting at.
the how things are going to be accomplished, the process for that, when it's going to happen, that doesn't belong in this list. This list is, what do we want, just like anything else we accomplish in the town. We want to renovate the fire station. Okay, how are we going to do it? You know, we don't spell out processes for things that, you know, aren't really kind of at the table at this point.
I see that, but I also see that the reason why we're here is that the town was very anxious about some zoning and decisions that were made. So I really do think, to Julia's point, that to include like some of this verbiage is really actually very important. So maybe it doesn't belong here. Maybe there's a lot of things that don't belong in here, but I think that that point is maybe like has the pulse of the people of the town.
Yep, I agree, and I think that's addressed in the sections when we talk about community-based plans and resident support. That's in
All right, I'm going to go in order. So you were next.
several times.
On that same vein, what if we look at the comment below? With the resulting zone equivalent to all abutting and/or the majority of the abutting zones. If we can maybe try to allow corrections to be made, but to keep it within reason for what the existing neighborhood supports.
Okay.
It just seems like, as Julia said, I feel like there needs to be a little protection there.
Yep, and Shelley's next.
You. Melissa and Connor, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure any of my properties that have had any questions about any changes in that area, I either get a piece of certified mail or I get a letter saying that I have an option to either show up at a meeting and or write to the town. So even when this process happens, it won't just kind of be like, oh, they got to look for, you know, this public hearing. Most likely people will get a letter in the mail that says this might be changing if you want to show up, or you'll call, right?
We won't call. We
No,
don't.
no, they would have to call or they would have to show up at the meeting, but they will get a letter. It's not like it will be ignored. I mean, I know I get
They're
letters.
noticed, they're noticed hearings. Everybody within 300 feet would get notified.
So I know when anything changes on either River Street or Washington Street or whatever, I get a letter that says these changes are going to happen. So those, I guess my question is, would most of those abutters get those same letters?
Yes.
Yes, so they would get letters to any zoning changes. So it's not like it would just be posted on the town's website and they would have to go look for that. They would be
We're
notified.
required, we are required by law to notify abutters to abutters within, actually for zoning, it's everybody within 300 feet. They get it to their actual house, and then we put it in the newspaper, website. I don't know who looks at the paper anymore, but the people in the immediate area will receive the letter at their homes.
Okay, and Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam President. Or Chair.
President.
Excuse me. It's a habit. Well, first off, I agree with the elimination of all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels. I think that is a really big problem we have in this town, and we have had for quite a while. And I think it is a problem that needs to be addressed. I think that the additional verbiage that was cited, I think if one was to take a look at a previous comment I had made on theme number 4 and item number 1, there is other language here and other guidelines here in that would take care of that follow-on process. I think we need to be careful that we are not painting with a broad brush when we talk about all areas and handling them all in a similar fashion. That I think there should be assurances by everybody here that they should be assured, I should say, that there is a process that is in place. It is state law, it's local law, it's notification of any kind of a process that occurs. There is nothing that in this town or this history that shows that things have been done behind closed doors. So this is a complete, transparent, and open process. And I'd like to caution us from projecting a little bit. And I think that this particular statement, as it's currently written, does exactly is the essence of what the problem is. And that the follow-on concerns, which are legitimate, which some of the previous speakers have stated, are handled through the process as well as other references in this document.
Okay, so to move this one forward, if somebody has an issue with it as written, in the way it's as written, please, we did this 5-finger thing right before, right? So it's, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have it.
Yeah, but
5
can
is, you absolutely love it as written, you love it, you want to keep it. 4, you're pretty much good. 3, some tweaks. 2, you're really not living with it. 1, you're not living with it. So what, okay, so
I would like to make a suggestion,
you might not be on,
and then I'm just going to pause while okay, my microphone is on.
okay.
So
turn it.
I think that as I'm understanding it from the planning department, we don't want to create a specific prescription for how every lot would be decided, because that's not the work of this committee at this time. It's, this is meant to be a menu. If you say you want fish, then you don't say, and that fish must be sushi, because maybe not everybody wants sushi. Maybe some people want salmon, some people want tuna, whatever. So in this case, rather than saying we should decide it in, because I think the verbiage was eliminated, it sounds like the verbiage was eliminated because we're not going to decide every property in exactly the same way every time. Rather, I think we can just leave the language as it is and add that it is the expectation of this committee that abutters would be consulted through the process and given an opportunity to voice their concerns about how the zoning should proceed with regard to their particular property.
So could we, just to make a suggestion based upon some of this, go with eliminate all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels and maybe you can help me here, Julia, and include the...
With the butter, with input from direct abutters.
Okay, and can we leave it at that? Does anyone have an issue with that? Dave, do you have an issue with that?
I don't have an issue. I'm just trying to understand the outcome of the process. If we eliminate split zoning, how does that affect the property owner? Are they grandfathered so that they can stay in the house for however long they stay there? Or are they forced to sell to the nearest commercial property owner who wants to make them sell their house?
Melissa, I don't know the answer to that.
Can I think it might be helpful, and I don't want to, draw this out, but it might be helpful to show an example on a screen. Would that be helpful?
Do you have
It would be helpful for me.
Okay.
Can you give me an address? I'll pull something up.
Actually, I'm going to ask you to go to GIS.
Oh, okay.
You can just do Braintree. And then he types in GIS. And if people buy the committee, and it is expected to click on the first link to intersect the ones that are highlighted. No, we never. And then I want you to zoom in on, I have one bar on this area. A little bit further. Okay, right here. And I want you to put on the layers. I want you to put on, scroll down a little bit, and throw on zoning and see it. I think it's less like, I feel like one's back to the 2024 layer. Commercial and time.
Okay, and thank you, Madam Chair. So this is an example in what I was speaking of earlier. This is the properties, this is the Children of America daycare and the swim school, and this is Dunkin' Donuts University. This is an office building. Now, if you can see on this one here, this is all parking for the office building. This is their driveway. This property is split. It has Residence B in the front, and it has commercial in the back. So that would be something we would say, it's an office building, it's a parking lot, that should be all commercial. This situation here with the Dunkin' Donuts University, same thing. They have parking that goes all into the Residence B areas. Why is that zoned Residence B?
Can I ask, isn't there a few houses in front of there?
There's a house here and here, yes.
So then what do
Yep.
we do with those houses?
The houses stay Residence B, because they're Residence B. But why is the guy who has an office building and a parking lot half residential and half commercial? It's an effort to clean up this, it's, the only way I can describe it is a zoning mess.
So the residence stays the same, but the corporate center behind it changes to completely commercial. Is that,
You readjust it so it's matching those lot lines.
Yeah.
Instead of just a straight line arbitrarily through these
Our,
lots.
our zoning lines don't match property lines. It is the most, I don't know how to describe it. It just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. So in this particular case, they have had this development, God, the building's been there for God knows how long. So that's just one example. I mean, we could go through this for hours, but again, just so that it's clear on, we're not talking about trying to take areas that are residential and convert them to commercial or highway business or general business if that isn't happening there. So it's an effort to look at the land use patterns in the developed areas and match the zoning if there's a split lot with what is going on that particular property.
So how could that potentially negatively impact a homeowner? Like, I'm just thinking of like that whole Banner Park. Now, I know this house wasn't in Braintree, it was in Weymouth. Like, where they were, that whole Banner Park issue where the
Banner
women's...
Park is all zoned highway business. There's no split
So-
zoning there.
So there's no, okay. So is there any instance that you can think of through the town that would kind of negatively impact a homeowner or a group of homeowners?
Again, the goal isn't to do things to negatively impact them. This is an example. I mean, maybe we can have a discussion offline. I'm not going to go through the whole map tonight. We haven't really, we analyzed this several years ago, and a lot of that is sort of away in file cabinets right now because we're working on other things. But we would not be looking, again, we would not be looking to say to this house, okay, we're going to make this, you know, we're going to do everything here commercial, and there's going to be all development in areas where there's no development now next to your house. These parcels are all developed. This is already all developed. It's not, it's an exercise in trying to eliminate commercial development in residential properties, and there might be some instances that are vice versa, actually. There are some instances in East Braintree where we have some homes in highway business districts.
Justine had a question.
Question is, if this is zoning, why is here? That my question to that is that wouldn't it be depends on the property owner's, you know, special permission or whatever permission to apply for it? Why is in the master plan when the town has planned for it?
The town and the planning board can sponsor rezone applications. We're entitled to do this type of work. It doesn't need to be the property owner as the applicant. There's various groups that can sponsor zoning amendments, including the planning board and the zoning board of appeals.
So other than just standardize, what are the benefit of doing it other than the town need to standardize their property usage?
I didn't hear that.
What's the benefit of this? Like, what does, so we do this broad stroke, so what's, like, what will we see as a
It's cleaning
result?
up this mess. This map, it has introduced areas, and you know, who knows? Maybe these people, I don't know, maybe they don't even want to be in a residential zoning district. I mean, I don't know. That's for a future discussion. But again, this is an effort to remove zoning that exists that is incompatible with the current built environment. It's not an effort to take vacant land and zone that that would have been residential that is now going to be something else. This is looking at the built environment. And anybody can go on the GIS and look at this and scan down Granite Street. I mean, it just gets, I just honestly don't understand why these strips were done. It has put homes in front of industrial parks. If you go up Granite Street, it's really not a good way to zone anything, frankly. I don't know why this town went and put residence A and B up against commercial. Honestly, it's done nothing but create problems for those people. And you're not going to turn around and say to these commercial property owners that have been there for 30, 40, 50 years, you can't use your property as commercial. So the zoning and the fact that we have these residential districts close to the commercial areas and the highway business areas is what's creating the problem. This will start to try to clean some of it up, but we talk about these buffers and we talk about all these things. Respectfully, if you had good zoning in the right areas, you wouldn't have a lot of these problems. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, looking at this map is, it's even these ones up here that well, they're just residential and residential, but again, the front yard's Res B and the backyard's Res A. Why? So the zoning requirements in the front is one set, and the zoning requirements in the back are another set? I mean, I could go on for hours about this. I would encourage people to turn on the zoning layer and look around, because it's something that you're not, no one looks at a property and goes, oh, that's Residence B or that's Residence A when you're driving by. You just see a house. But again, so the setbacks here are different than the setbacks here? I'm sorry, that just makes no sense.
So like by Liberty and Grove, the houses that are by that CVS that are going in, aren't they all different? They're not residential, right? Or weren't there some issues with how they were zoned?
Which area are you talking about?
Like over by where the new CVS is on.
At the Liberty and Grove intersection, all the homes behind there are Residence A.
But what about the homes along the road?
The homes along the road.
Along Grove.
Can you type in an address, Jennifer, for
Where do you do it? I'm sorry, I don't use this site.
the intersection of Liberty and Grove Street?
That was your question? Oh.
Connor, where do you type in an address?
365 is a good one.
But where do you find the? Okay, got it. Street? Oh, sorry.
So what are these?
So what's your question?
So what?
This was another mess that we cleaned up, actually.
So-
This is a good example that we already took care of.
So what, so the houses that are along Grove,
These?
yes, is purple residential?
Purple's Res B, this is Res A.
Okay, so
These are all split.
So they're Res A and Res B, though? They're not commercial?
No. This one here on the corner, and this is an example of how we cleaned up this split lot. We had GB at the corner that was very, very small. The old gas station, some of it was in the general business and some of it was in the Residence B area. So we cleaned up the corner, we made the GB a normal size that would support a reasonable size development. CVS is pretty small in the development scheme. And then the back area is the part that the town purchased, so we didn't do anything back there, because it's just for, we don't care about the.
Are they still split? It looks like they're split.
This hasn't been updated.
Okay.
Yeah, but
okay.
this is, the general business is the part that you see that's fenced off, that's being developed, and then the rest of it. So this lot here, this one lot, was general business, Res B and Res A, one lot,
And then we made it general business.
a portion of it.
And then everyone else on the road is now turned into what? Res A, so you said it was Res A and Res B?
We didn't do anything with the neighborhood. These are all
So they
existing.
still have split zones?
These are all split.
So how, under your new way of doing it, would those houses, what would that turn into?
The zoning would match the property boundary. So these are the
So it would
property
be one
lines.
zone, but which zone would it be? A or B?
It would be B. These would be extended back to be B, and this neighborhood here that's all A and intact would stay. These are newer lots, newer subdivisions, you can see they match, and then these would be extended to be B. So that the zoning matches the property boundary.
Okay,
I'm glad you mentioned that one, that's a good
okay. I see.
example.
Okay, Liz has a question.
Only concern, my only concern, it's on the same idea of what Dave Cunningham was talking about. When we look at some of the lots on Granite Street that we were referring to, you have some houses right on Granite, and behind them might be a business. And if, say there are 3 houses there on Granite, and they're Res B, but there's a business behind them, if we change those, the zoning for those houses to match the businesses behind them, will those houses be squeezed out? And that's kind of what my concern is, that, say then the house in the middle sells out because now he wants to sell out to a business, then those two other residential properties, their residential property value may not be the same as it was before. I'm not sure, but it does lend some concern that,
Those lots there, the house lots along Granite Street, those probably wouldn't be what we're looking at. Again, refer to the example I gave about an actual developed commercial site that is split in half. The other thing is that zoning district commercial, if you have a 15,000 square foot Res B lot, you're not going to comply with the commercial requirements. So you wouldn't be able to, quote, sell out and just develop in the middle of a bunch of houses because you don't meet the zoning requirements.
Okay, so we got to move forward a bit. So if the way it's written is, let me get to where it's written. What number are we on?
I have it on the screen here.
2R, thank you. Thank you. Okay, all right, hold on.
Something that might soften the statement as well, Madam Chair, is taking out the word all.
Okay. Would the comment below help anybody? The comment is, so eliminate all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels. And then the comment, with the resulting zone equivalent to all abutting and/or majority of abutting zones. Does that soften it for anyone?
That's what eliminating the split zone means.
So it's just clarification, but maybe
But that,
clarification.
just so everyone's aware,
Yeah,
like,
so,
it's not saying commercial and Res B and we're going highway business.
right,
Yeah.
it's just giving further clarification. That, does anyone feel like that could be added to give, and then there was one other comment that was strong, was that Julia's, there's a lot, everyone's comment is strong, but Julia had thoughts about the public input process. Does anyone object to adding anything about, again, this could be how it goes anyway, but just as a kind of a reminder, just adding a little bit of verbiage to include, you know, that this would be part of public input, whatever that process is that we already have, the public input process. Yes, Councilor Reynolds.
I think that you're onto something there, but I think just to make it a clearer process is if it is the will of the committee to add the additional verbiage, but I think it's just a very straightforward as the next step will apply to the current process of planning and zoning review. And if someone is curious about it, they look it up. They see how it is. I mean, I guess I'm getting a little worried that we're making this into the War and Peace. You know?
Well, I think we are. Raina, go ahead. Oh, sorry,
yeah.
were you not done?
Yeah, just to be clear, I understand what the chairwoman's intent is, I believe, and I think that a very simple reference to the current process may be what's efficient or sufficient.
Okay, Raina?
I'm not sure if I think I'm on your line in that. I was thinking the added verbiage clarification about the process, I'd like to see it broader, more overall, not just in this instance, but they would apply to many instances. So, you know, if you want to make a comment or clarification, I don't know where to put it exactly, but I wouldn't just put it in the split zoning, right? I mean, it seems to me you'd want it to be a broader thing about public process.
Well, I think we put in the general vision, there was some verbiage about like public input and community-supported projects, right? So this is a little different because it's like it's part of the zoning, right? So that if we're going to kind of clean up the zoning parcels, you know, I mean, it's not necessary. There is a process, but I just think maybe mentioning the process makes people feel on this committee maybe a little better.
Yeah, I don't object. I just think
Okay.
we may want to say it other places too. That's all.
So does anyone object if we just move it forward and say, eliminate all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels with the resulting equivalent to all abutting and/or majority of the abutting zones, and we continue with the public process and as part of the public process currently established? Yes.
So take out the piece that Liz just asked us to add back in, the taking care to mitigate impact of uses incompatible with residential uses and to preserve and expand, protect. I have all that in there right now.
Well, maybe leave it and just add, do you have issue if we add it?
Well, I don't, what I'm concerned about is that that kind of language to me sounds more like we're telling zoning what to do. And I think what the question at hand here is making a reference to an existing process that we have on our zoning books and our bylaws that, as Director Santucci-Rossi walked through for us. So I think that's as simple as it needs to be, is that we stated quite simply that eliminate all instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels, and the review process as per section such of the zoning bylaw, something to that nature.
Okay, so just so we can move forward, if we're gonna, we'll do a five-finger vote here. If we want to change it, if we want to update it, because we just need to take the temperature of everybody sitting in this committee. So so 5 is you want to hate it completely, and then 3 is if you take a couple of tweaks. Okay, so we're going to have to go with the version that's there, because the version that's written is eliminating instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels. If you want to keep it word for word, not adding bit of 5. If you want to add something, give it a 3 or less, or 2 or less. Okay, and everyone, let's just vote, because we are on the first, and I think we probably have 10 more, maybe 20. Dave, do you want to say something before we? You're ready to vote? All right. Okay, so let's vote. Okay. So I think I'm seeing some tweaks. Okay. So if we could, if I read the tweaks right, some people would like it to say something about the public process as part of the public process, or part of the process in place. Am I reading that right? Shake your head if you're reading that right. Okay, so we want the public process included, and and also, do we want anything said about this other comment with the resulting zone equivalent? And some people do. Okay, I do.
Can I read what I wrote here? You might not be able to see this, but I have it in there.
Let's see it. Yeah.
And I have highlighted right now that middle phrase that we originally added back in a few minutes ago.
Okay.
So just for the sake of reading it the way I think I hear you wanting it, I'm going to delete that, but I'm going to copy it. I'm going to save it in my computer. So if you want that back, it's easy to get it back.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the way I think you want it is eliminate instances. I struck the word all.
Okay.
Eliminate instances of split zoning that occur on individual parcels with the resulting zone equivalent to all abutting and/or a majority of the abutting zones, with input from direct abutters through the current process of planning and zoning review.
Okay. Can we live with that? Everyone, can we vote again? Okay. Is anyone under a 3? Are you under a 3? Are you under a 3? Oh, you're fine with it. All right. I thought you said, yeah, I'm under a 3, and I was wanted to hear. Okay. Are we fine? We're shaking? Okay. All right. Okay. So let's move to the next. Anyone have an issue with anything else, strategy-wise? And audience, I think if you have an issue, we would want to hear from you. Okay. Okay. So anyone else? Justine?
Clarification, are we talking about anything else before we go into the table the topics?
Okay, could you say that again?
So we had tabled the topic from last meeting.
Oh, we tabled the topic, yes, okay. So there was a, yes. There was a strategy, I believe it was just one, am I wrong?
Well, there's two, because they
There's
were
two.
related, yeah. 4N
Okay, she highlighted me.
and 4Y.
Okay, all right. Oh, I see, okay, all right. So let's start with 4N, if we could. So these were tabled, so we couldn't come to an agreement, so I'd like us to try to put our heads together to come to a sort of an agreement, okay? And this was after like 4 hours, just for those, so let's hope we can get to an agreement tonight. If we really can't get to an agreement, let's just table it again, because I don't know that some of these we will. Okay, 4N, okay. Consider options to incentivize public placemaking and other public benefits from private developers, such as using a public improvement special permit process to offer flexibility in exchange for public improvement projects to create public gathering spaces for a Braintree community at large, including assisting with extending the Manattaquit River Walk. Okay.
Madam Chair, just for information for the members, I put the, we already have this in our ordinance in the Braintree Weymouth Landing District. I've provided a copy of that for everybody in the packet. And then I have also another example from another community with some different verbiage. It looks like ours is a little bit tighter, and that is section 135, 61508. So we already have it in the zoning. We've used it. We've gotten a great river walk out of it. Millions of dollars of private investment that will be actually deeded to the town. So that's just one example of what can be done with this. I know there was some concerns related to that. There was some comments from somebody in the thing that said this can be done under the current special permit, and that is not true. It can only be done in the Braintree Weymouth Landing zoning district.
Okay, I don't think it's limited, though. The whole discussion really wasn't about that, like, that was just an example. Like, this kind of almost bleeds into, I feel like the way this reads now, I don't, they're kind of, it almost stops, like flexibility in exchange for public improvement projects to create public gathering spaces for the Braintree community at large. It really didn't have anything to do with the Manattaquit River Walk, in my recollection. I mean, that was an example, yes, but it didn't really, like, the whole discussion wasn't really about that. Am I wrong, Peter? You were part of this discussion. Did you think it had specifically to do with the Manattaquit River Walk? Peter? Broader. Okay, that's what, that was my recollection too, that it was just a broad, so we couldn't come to an agreement, so if we could just maybe, for those that had an issue, explain your issue, and then for those in support, explain your support. Liz?
Okay, if you read through all of the data that we have gathered, there's a lot of concern in the town about projects being too dense, and the way this is written, it's much too vague, and I think it allows a little too much control to certain boards, and I feel that people don't want deals made in exchange for density. I think we have zoning bylaws for a reason, and I think it's important for the public to be able to count on those zoning bylaws and to know that they will be enforced. And I do not see this as something that Braintree residents are crying out for. I think there may be some instances that have worked, but there's also some instances that did not. For example, Landing 53 left the town with some financial gaps that we're still not making up for many years later. And I just think this allows a little bit too much wiggle room from my comfortability level.
So could we add some verbiage to make you more comfortable in this process, in this specific bullet?
Not the way this is written, no. I think it should be removed. I think we have enough through our process, and I don't think we should have boards cutting deals. And I think that's basically what this comes down to.
Okay. Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you. I do respect that opinion. However, I do have a different view. I know that I'm curious about what this financial, and I know this isn't the forum for it, but this
Yeah.
financial shortfalls from Landing 53. I'd like, well, you'd have to be more specific, and as I
Okay.
said.
And I just want to clarify, that wasn't part of the special permit. That tax deal was not part of the special permit.
Right.
That was a deal that was approved by the town council. That had nothing to do with the special permit. Absolutely nothing.
Okay, well,
So, if I may.
anyway, I feel that there's just a little
I
too
think I
much
had the
wiggle room
table.
in this.
I think I had the
Sure.
table. Thank
Well,
you.
you asked me a question. so
Yeah,
I was
and I got my answer, so thank you. So in terms of, we have boards that are empowered by state law and empowered by our bylaws. So I'm a little uncomfortable with references being made that there is some kind of deals being struck that are at the, that harm our community. And I'm really taken back by it. I hear it a lot. And there's no evidence whatsoever of any kind of activity like that ever occurring. And we take great amount of time and effort and integrity in ourselves when we come before this town and on behalf of the town. And to have people throw out saying that there's backroom deals with no evidence, it doesn't help this process. If you have something that is very specific, I'm all ears.
I
But
didn't say backroom.
Well, it
I
sounded to
said a
me
deal.
that there was
I did
deals
not
being.
use
Oh,
that
all right.
phrase.
Well, I used that term, and just to, but in insert, you inferred that there was something undue that is being done on our. That there are people who lack integrity who serve our town on these various boards. That is what I heard, and I totally disagree with you on that. And if you don't like these types of things, this is what elections are for.
Right.
Elections, that is what people elect our public officials. Our mayor gets elected and appoints these boards. And they're doing it, and they take an oath to do what is in the best interest of our town and to do things legally. So I really do take exception with these facts that this is the justification to put things in here like this. I mean, excuse me, that you have an objection to something like this based on that reasoning.
I have something to say here. I think that because, you know, like if we think about the planning board, I think that there's probably likely changes coming, right, next year. There'll probably be a completely different planning board. And I think sometimes it's tough when you're working with a planning board to rely on, you know, different boards. And so I don't think it's an insult necessarily, but I think there's probably likely changes coming, and I'm sure there's be consistent changes, and this is a 10-year plan. So I think that there is some, and we saw this through the survey, some concern about what Braintree wants to be and concern about what is important to people in Braintree. So I think that's where it's coming from, not like a personal dig to anybody, you know, to be honest. But so I think we could talk about this forever, but I think if we don't create some verbiage to kind of move it forward, we're going to sit here for a long time. So I'm wondering if we could try to come up with something that meets everybody's thoughts. And Raina, you're next.
I think you got to where I was going. I wanted to get back to this specifically and ask if you had some suggestions. I'd like to hear them.
So I know that we say publicly supported a lot in the document, and I think we do because there is anxiety in the town. And so I think that's why we do it, and we saw that anxiety through the survey. We you know, the data's the data. You can say it doesn't count, but it's the data. So we saw the anxiety. So maybe we, again, look to try to add verbiage that includes sort of, you know, like the Riverwalk is community supported. right? Like that community, that area supports that, right, in the Adams Street area. They want to do some changes, not the Riverwalk, Allen Street, I'm thinking of Allen Street, right? So that area supports it, but maybe we just add in some verbiage that it's supported by the neighborhood in which it resides, right? So the district councilor works with the people to be heard, and really be heard, because we have a problem with that in Braintree too. So I think that would be good to get the people in the community and resident groups in the neighborhood that it affects to be heard, and maybe we just add that to this. Would that be acceptable to anybody?
I would say that I'm a living example of
I
that
think
right
you are.
now with the St. Thomas More property.
Right.
That as a counselor representing the interests of the neighbors, and the opinions are varied amongst those neighbors, of butters and neighbors. So it is, I would be fine with that type of an approach.
Okay, could we, oh, Julie has questions.
Thank you. When you suggest a public improvement special permit process, what I'm not clear on is how is such a special permit process arrived at, the terms of that process? How are those terms arrived at? Who crafts the path for somebody to obtain a special permit? And then if you know what the path is, I would like to know it.
I've given an example. It's in the packet. We have it in our zoning right now. It was approved by the council, I don't know, some years ago now. And it's essentially, let me just find my copy here. Section 135, 61508. And if you're going to provide public improvements, as it spells out here, for example, this says provisions of publicly accessible waterfront walkway with direct connections to adjacent sidewalk and existing or potential walkways on adjacent properties, and that section goes on and on and on. Now, this is for the landing. Now, there might be other types of things that the community would be looking for, and again, this would be a zoning amendment that would go into the zoning bylaw, so it would be there'd be public hearings with the planning board, and also public hearings with the council, which I have to note, a lot of our public hearings for rezones, nobody comes to them. The council sees my reports. Nobody comes to them. Then it comes to the council to explain it, and nobody's there for it either. So there are processes in place that, frankly, people are not availing themselves of the opportunity to participate. So again, this is an example of what we do in the landing. The special permit process is the same as it is for use special permits. You file with the planning board, you have a public hearing, and in this particular case, instead of the criteria for a use special permit, this is the criteria. So what are you asking for, and are you providing any of these things? And is augmenting the development and allowing flexibility worth those public benefits to the community? That's really the question.
Who crafted the language for this special permit?
The previous director.
Okay, so the planning department crafts the terms of the special permit that may be applied for. Am I understanding that
So
correctly?
there are multiple people that can craft zoning and submit zoning amendments. The planning board, the zoning board, 10-person citizen petition. So there's a variety of people that are enabled by state law to write zoning and propose zoning in communities.
Okay.
So any of those people could do something like this.
But this one was done by the planning department?
This was done by the previous planning director.
And one might imagine that if we encourage something to happen through the master plan, that the town might take that on, rather than a citizens group or something of that nature. Does that make sense?
It could be the town, it could be a consultant, it could be, it could be, but a town sort of overseeing process.
And then the council votes to accept this special permit because it's a zoning change?
No, the council votes to accept the text amendment.
The text amendments to the bylaw?
Yes.
Okay. So section 135, 61508 was voted in by the council?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And all of those involve because it's a zoning change, it involves a public hearing?
Correct.
Okay. And then when a special permit is applied for, then that hearing is also a public hearing?
Correct.
Okay. And those are all public meetings and subject to public meeting law?
Yes.
So there is a public process for all of this in place to which we already adhere?
Correct. We just did it for 44 Allen Street.
Okay. So I have a lot of confidence in our public boards. Everybody is, can disagree. It's a free country. We can disagree. We often do. And I would note that anybody who is dissatisfied with our government structure or the checks and balances to power as they exist at present should take advantage of the opportunity that you have right now to provide that feedback to the charter review process, which is simultaneously underway right now. And I believe Justine Huang is on that, so there's your person to talk to. So I think that this is a tool that these boards can benefit from to help residents get something which the master plan has seen a lot of evidence that we want. We want public places, public gathering places. We want green spaces. We want open space. We want trees. We want playgrounds and so forth. So I think that having this tool is one way that the current planning board and planning boards down the line may use, which the public will have adequate ability to weigh in on, and for those reasons, I'm going to support it as it's currently stated.
So can we just kind of take a temperature here so we can see if we need to move on, or Justine was next.
Thanks. The question I have concern about this one is it's only addressing the public's gathering space. Example that I'm not seeing, maybe it's not broad enough if we're giving that special permit. Example, we're in the 10% affordable housing. We did not, right here, this one only addressing the gathering space. What if there's public, there's a building that do not comply with the 10% and bring in our housing, our affordable lower than 10%. What I'm trying to give an example is the special permit is only addressing, gathering space perspective.
I think because of the inclusionary bylaw that passed, I think that it's a non-issue now. Am I right?
If I may, through the chair, the inclusionary bylaw is at the council. There was concerns related to, the planning board had concerns about the 15% rate requirement on the smaller projects. They asked for a study to be done. I got a grant. We're going to get the study done to see if the 15 works. But the inclusionary is separate from, you wouldn't, we talked about doing density bonuses early on in the inclusionary that would up the amount of inclusionary, and there wasn't support for that in the community. So we took that out of the text. And if the community was interested in that, that's where that would belong, not in here. That should be, if you're looking to get more affordable units in a residential development, it should be in the inclusionary section, not in here. And we took it out.
Okay. Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is that can we border this if we're giving, a improvement for special process being used, not just, public space? Is it something else that the resident feel comfortable they can get more benefit? Example, what I'm saying is, the gathering space might be only for the area residents. What about the rest of the town? What are we benefit for? That's why I cannot live with the verbiage here that just specifically for one purpose of public gathering space.
I think it's public gathering space.
Yeah.
I think it means you don't just have to live there. Like you can use the dog park if they have a dog, right?
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
that's what.
The example I cited, where they're actually going to build the Riverwalk and then deed that land to the town. So not only do we getting the improvements, but we're getting about an acre of land.
So we own it. It's, the town owns it, or will own it when it's done.
Did you have your hand up? Okay. Amy?
Can we take out, it's only referencing the Manattaquit Riverwalk, can we just use that as an example and not keep that in here as a statement?
I don't think it was intended to be in here.
I think we can end it after at-large. I think we might have talked about that.
I think we did
Yeah.
in the last one. It shouldn't be limited to just that.
No, because there might be, like, if there's something up in the Highlands, or something on Upper Granite or something like that, you know, that's an example in that particular area that is very paved and commercial and border, actually more industrial. If there was opportunity for redevelopment there to try to add some green space that the neighbors in that quadrant of community could benefit from. Yeah, I think everybody should.
May I read how, I've been editing as you were
All right,
talking.
good.
Do you mind if I read what it says? I'm not sure everyone can see it. So I have consider options to incentivize, and I added this, neighborhood-supported public placemaking and other public benefits from private developers, such as using a public improvement special permit process to offer flexibility in exchange for public improvement projects, and then I added, such as, to create public gathering spaces for the Braintree community at large, period.
Can we take a,
Although
like,
we
a
have two
temperature?
such ases, so the English is terrible,
Yeah.
but I can fix that.
Can we take a temperature now, like just to kind of move it forward? Sorry, Raina.
But I want to vote on the revised version, not the original.
Yeah, we can do that.
Like
Yep, we
last,
can do
let's
that.
just, okay.
But just one, Dave, we're talking about the revised version now?
Before taking the vote, can we have a definition of placemaking?
Of what?
Definition of
Placemaking.
placemaking.
Oh, so you can use, public placemaking is basically a design technique, I guess, you'd say, for public gathering spaces. So you could do that through benches or other improvements so that people can gather and enjoy a space. You could also do that through public art if you wanted to, murals, that kind of thing. But it's basically making it feel as though it's a place, meaning like an outdoor room almost, so that people can spend time with other people reading book, having a picnic, whatever it is.
And the concept behind this? The concept? The concept behind this is that the public would be entitled to come upon private property and use it as if it was public property?
That's one way, or the developer can deed a piece of property back to the town for a public park or a playground or, you know, an area with benches, yeah. Could go either way. I've seen it done both ways.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's try to take a temperature here. Is there any, maybe we just raise your hand, if you can't get to a 3 on this, is there anybody that can't get to a 3? Cannot get to a 3? Cannot, everyone else is like 3 and above? Okay, so as written, second, the revised, okay.
And I'm just going to fix the two such ases, so
Okay.
the next time you see that, that'll be smoothed out.
Okay, so then there was one more that we didn't get to, or I don't remember this being tabled, to be honest with you, but it was a long night, so perhaps.
Can I explain? I think what happened was some folks were trying to combine 4Y with the one we just talked about so that the broader representation would be related to the public benefit improvement. But others were saying we want to keep that as a separate thing because it applies more broadly than just that one idea. Yeah.
So for everyone reading 4Y, when developing housing regulations, policies, or programs, include a broader representation of the community members, particularly those impacted by the decision-making process. Is anyone under a 3? Can't live with this. Let's move it forward.
I think it's good that way.
Increased parking in the 3 business districts in the town, added to the language talking about doing streetscape improvements, because frankly, if all we do is streetscape improvements and we don't do anything to deal with the parking problems, we're going to have some pretty trees and some pretty sidewalks and some empty storefronts.
Does anyone have a problem with that? Is anyone 3 or less on Dave's suggestion to include in the streetscapes? I think we have parking somewhere in this. but-
Yeah, Madam Chair, to Member Cunningham, 2W, 2X, 2Y is basically our attack, the lack of parking, sort of, that not enough?
I was hoping we could make it more specific.
Okay,
Okay.
does anyone have an issue? Is anyone 3 or less on? Yep, we have a comment.
Again, I just want to caution us that, you know, these are guidelines. This whole process is a guideline process, and I think we have to be careful about what we're doing. That to me sounds like you're trying to write a zoning law.
Actually, all I'm trying to do is address a problem within the town with a specific solution. I mean, we have 3 business districts. All of them have inadequate parking. All of them have difficulty keeping the small businesses that are there in business. We have empty storefronts on a regular basis in all 3 of the districts, and every small business owner that I've ever met who does business in those districts talks about the problem with parking, not only for customers, but for employees. Nobody ever says there's too much parking. It's always there is not enough parking.
I would agree, if I may, just to respond to that. I agree with what the issue is. I'm not disagreeing with your statement of what you'd like to go in as far as addressing the issue. I'm just cautioning that I think the verbiage does bring out and articulate what the concern is from a guidance standpoint of what this document is trying to provide.
Can I suggest something maybe? Under 2W, 2X, 2Y, can we write and pay, because I agree with you, like I go to the squares, I try to keep all my business to the squares, so I agree with you, but could we write with particular attention paid to the 3 business, is that what we call them, business districts? Or do you want it to be a separate, can you live with it incorporated, or do you want it to be a separate bullet?
Oh, it's fine with me if it's incorporated into 2WXY and just specifically includes language that addresses the need for increased parking.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Jen, could you add that? And let me say, does anyone have a problem with this? Councilor Reynolds, are you?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay,
So hold on, I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right. So I am editing as you're talking, but I think I put it in the wrong spot. Okay. So 2W, 2X, 2Y talks more heavily about managing the existing parking better.
and
It
then,
doesn't,
well, sorry, go ahead.
it doesn't really talk about increasing parking necessarily, and I think that was done specifically because a lot of the parking is basically some parking is underutilized. It just may be farther away from the businesses. And so part of looking at parking management is who's parking close to the businesses, who's parking far away, where are long-term parkers parking, people who work there all day, for example. And so a parking management study, which is what this is talking about, also looks at shared parking agreements and other solutions to take your existing inventory to understand it better and look at the utilization. But it's not to knock down buildings, build more parking, build parking garages. That's not what this, so I just want to be clear about that. I don't want to try to trick anybody to say that 2W, 2X, 2Y is about expanding to build more parking.
So maybe it should be its own, because
Well, I think it's a policy decision for you guys to talk about openly. I don't want to try to hide it in this.
Shelley?
When we did talk about this before, we were saying that there really isn't a place to put more parking because it is all developed, and that's where we came up with that strategy or idea of talking to like a 400 or a 420 Washington Street, where they do have excess parking spaces, where we can come up with those shared parking agreements or private lot operators, because there isn't a place to right now, obviously, or nor do we want parking lots. So that was our way of trying to identify and then go after and create partnerships so that we could create more parking spots and do a study for that. Does that make sense?
I'm all for everything you're talking about, but when push comes to shove, there is not enough parking provided in the 3 business districts that is open to the public. The front page of the Quincy of the Patriot Ledger 2 days ago had the city of Quincy talking about adding 1,000 spaces to Quincy Square, and it happens to be a building that is going to be knocked down and turned into parking for Quincy Square. So we're going to be competing, specifically the Landing and Braintree Square, with Quincy Square 2 miles away that will have 2 big parking lots built fairly close in time to each other. And I don't think our local businesses want to be in a situation where they have to compete with downtown Quincy for customers.
All right, I hear what you're saying. I just changed this again. I think we're not going to answer that question here. Right now, we don't have enough data to support whether you have enough parking or not. I think we probably all have lots of opinions. So what I said here instead is, conduct a town parking study with particular attention to the 3 business districts to establish the adequacy of the current parking inventory, identify overutilized and underutilized parking areas, update the town's parking regulations for private properties, and establish a parking management plan for commercial areas with specific strategies for underutilized parking, public parking options, such as designated parking for employees of area businesses, shared parking agreements with private lot operators, and wayfinding signage. So that kind of study can answer that question. To
Dave,
what level is it adequate?
Does that work for you?
I just don't think it addresses the underlying problem that everybody in the town knows about. We don't need a study to know that the 3 districts in the town have inadequate parking. Everybody knows it already.
Could we do stronger verbiage to?
Well, if I may, through the chair, we actually did do a parking study in Braintree Square and South Braintree Square. And to Member Cunningham's, I would say that the Landing definitely needs more parking. There's no question about that. South Braintree Square is more of a management and enforcement situation. There is so much parking in South Braintree Square that's not utilized with the items Jen had mentioned, shared and things like that. Because there are some properties there that have a lot of parking that just sits empty all day, and frankly, it's just a waste. So the effort of paving other areas and having all this pavement in those areas. But I think the Landing definitely needs some more parking. So maybe we could add something also to this and also to increase parking stock if that is what comes out of this analysis.
Okay. Justine?
As Melissa said, we just did a study. Why can't we make this is a more action-driven in terms of the town, making a parking management strategy versus just a study?
Yeah, we did the counts, and then there's mixed feelings about different things in managing parking. Respectfully, meters manage parking, enforcement manages parking. There's different tools that you can use to manage that, and there's a difference of opinion on those things in some areas. I think it might be helpful to kind of take that to the next step, and think about some different options. And I've made some suggestions in the past about approaching some of these private property owners. I'll call out a couple people, Bank of America, go over there right now. You know, somebody could put a restaurant in line somewhere and use those spaces at night. And because the infrastructure's already there. This idea of, you know, trying to add more in certain areas maybe doesn't work. And again, the landing aside, because again, all the properties at the landing themselves don't have any parking. So that's like a needs a double review. And then I think some of the other areas, it's more of a managing the inventory and trying to create, we talked a little bit about this last time, where, you know, carving out areas for employees to park where it's extended. These are service workers, they need, you know, they're not gonna pay $2 an hour to park somewhere. So how can we try to create the infrastructure that the small businesses need for their workers and also for their customers?
Yeah.
Because without that, frankly, it's just not successful.
Right. Councilor Reynolds?
Yeah, I like the idea that Member Hong came up with as far as making this more of an action related statement. I mean, we've just heard, and I do remember very distinctly these traffic studies parking studies that have been done, as well as MAPC coming in and their assessments. I think to Member Cunningham's point, data is great, but what are we doing with it? And so can we make some kind of a statement that says pursue data-driven solutions to address the inadequacies in our business zones? I know North Braintree has a very big challenge, but are there solutions? I think that there could be, but using the data, using the types of businesses that are there, what are we trying to create for that area, not just North Braintree, but the other two as well. I think that probably is the best approach, is what Member Hong had suggested in terms of creating pursuing an action, ideas, implementing a plan based on the data that we've accumulated.
Councilor, are you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Florida.
Thank you. I don't mean to muddy the waters, but how old is the study that we've just done? And is what we're proposing in this substantially different, or is there a need for an updated study? I just want to make sure that we're not putting in something that's redundant.
So we had Nelson Nelgard, that was probably 6 years ago. As part of our local rapid recovery, MAPC was our partner on that, went back out and had the same conclusion. There's plenty of spots, they're just not managed properly. So a parking management plan. This also, just so people, this goes beyond just the squares. Like I'll draw an example when we talk about us doing parking inventories. Go over to the marketplace. And I don't know about you folks, but that place is just overparked to the point it just doesn't even look desirable anymore. It's so a lot of asphalt, very little landscaping. So looking at those types of areas as well, the days of overparking things and worrying about parking and those type of standalone sites, this town's parking requirements are too high. And you can tell that by driving around anywhere. So it's not only just the squares, it's looking at some of our land use in our established retail areas, commercial areas, and looking at the parking utilization and understanding, does retail need this much parking? Does a restaurant need this much parking? What needs more? What needs less? So this goes more than just the inventory in the squares.
So the virtue of it is mainly that it addresses the whole town. And, I certainly agree there are places that are overparked. The Plaza, Granite Plaza, the South Shore Plaza, the Marketplace. Yeah, so I can understand that. And I guess it will be useful then for that study to have the prior study on the squares.
It would be a different type of inventory that you would be looking at. You'd be looking at, in the squares, they're kind of looking at a few different things. You have people that live in those areas that park on the street. You have workers, you have and you have customers. In some of these other situations, it's really, maybe it's just employees, maybe it's employees and customers. So another example is our office parks, Braintree Hill Office Park. John Roach will tell you there's whole swath sections that we haven't paved in, that we haven't plowed in 20 years because no one's parked there. So what are we doing here? You know, respectfully, paving's not making us any money. So what can we do to take advantage of some of the infrastructure that's surplus and put it to a better use? I mean, even if it's not development, make it grass. So I think the parking needs a full soup to nuts, and I think that putting, keeping this broad and encompassing will then allow options for what we want to tackle and maybe set up a hierarchy of how the order in which we may want to tackle those.
I understand much better now, thank you.
So Dave, do you feel that you've,
I think I've beaten the horse.
okay,
Well, can I say, I've been changing this as you're talking.
All
Can I
right.
read you the latest version?
please.
All right. Pursue data-driven solutions to address the parking needs in our business areas to establish an adequate parking inventory, increase parking stock as needed, appropriately utilize existing parking areas, update town's parking regulations, and establish a parking management plan. This is all about business areas, so I'm going to delete that. Did that make sense the way I read it? I'm just correcting some spelling problems.
Liz?
Do we want to add any verbiage into parking sharing to state that, or is it just assumed in this process?
I said establish a parking management plan. I could say including shared parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that better?
Are we good to move forward? Like, is anybody below a 3? Okay, does anyone have any other strategy issues? Everyone's like afraid. Any other strategy issues? Oh, yes, we have an audience member. Please come up to the podium. Thank you. If you could speak into the microphone, yeah.
Yes, sorry. I had some comments about the first comment on the packet, but I wasn't sure when to slot that in. So first off, I just wanted to say if it's a good time or if there's another time that you think might be good.
We want to hear from you, so you tell us what you want to tell us.
Thank you. I wrote down a few thoughts, so would it be all right if I shared?
Absolutely.
Yes. Sorry. I read the report. I've been following the process a little bit on my own, and I was thinking, with regards to the strategy shortlist, a couple of things from the report that I think merit addressing that I just wanted to bring to your attention is that the demographics of the town have changed significantly in the past decade and longer than a decade, and 30% of the community is now composed of BIPOC folks, and those numbers are definitely increasing. And a third of Braintree households are low or moderate income, and the vast majority, according to the report, 73% of those households that are low or moderate income are burdened by the cost of housing and the cost of rent. And so those are the things that, from my reading of the report, struck me as a resident and knowing other folks that live here. So I was the person that wrote that first comment in the packet, and I am not sure what parts of those specifically. I think they are relevant to the fifth theme about public services, as well as, of course, housing. But I think that in particular, I wanted to share that I grew up in Braintree. I went to Braintree Public Schools. I've lived in the town for 15 years. My grandmother spent the last years of her life here. And I think like many of the people of color in this town, I feel a lot less comfortable using public services and participating in civic life here. And growing up, I've also witnessed a lot of racism and harm done to residents here, and including kids that I grew up with. And I've participated in this culture too. I've seen how the lack of safe and welcoming spaces where Asian, Black, and Hispanic people can feel comfortable and confident enough to stand up and advocate for themselves has contributed to the exclusion of marginalized people in our community. And as I've grown and become a better person, I've also hoped that my town can better serve and actively listen to the most marginalized people in its community. And that's why I think it's very important that the steering board and the council take note of the fact that our demographics are changing, and the next 10 years are an opportunity to repair harms that have been done to people who have lived here, and also people who have lived invisible lives here, and to create access to spaces through public facilities, housing, and expanded public services that can encourage people to feel safe and welcomed and able to speak for themselves. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak for myself for a little bit.
Thank you so much, and welcome. And part of the process, we were very, all of us, I think, as we were creating the vision statement, really wanted to make sure that it was like an all-inclusive, and we kind of kept referencing that piece of it, is that you're right, the demographics of this town have changed. So we wanted to make sure it was an inclusive master plan for sure. And maybe Justine has something to say. Yeah.
Thank you. So if you're looking at the master plan, if you're looking at the last page 10 of 5W, X, and LL, we have specifically asked to make sure that we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusive. And also, you might not seen it, we have done a lot this year so far. The mayor has recognized that May as an API month for town Braintree. And we have established, I am the president of Chinese American Association Braintree, and the mayor has supported us since then, providing public space such as the town hall. We're able to utilize it for like 3 times a month, anytime we need, and the mayor has supported the celebration of different Lunar New Year's, and working with the town department to celebrate the August Moon Festival in September. And this is where we specifically has it as diversity, equity, and I'm working with the mayor and one of the well-known diversity empowerment advocate. She's meeting with the mayor next week to just see how can we bring in diversity empowerment to town, at least the city hall, the town hall, the government, and the school environment perspective. So that's one is being addressed, and we did talk about it in the, topic number 5. And I just want to let you know why I am on the board also. I'm representing the resident in terms of diversity, minority perspective, because we are a couple of us in the same district. And one of the concern when I was going on board was that just in the same district, it was other residents, but because what we need somebody like you to stand up more, to look for opportunity, to expand the town empowerment, the diversity is not, thank you for standing up and asking for it. I think that's a really good example of, as Councilor Ronald say, it's election year. If you see something, you want to do something, looking into the election year, take that opportunity.
Great. Raina had something to say.
I don't usually speak loud enough, sorry. I wanted to thank you for not only what you did, but bearing with us all this time. And I was wondering if you haven't already, would you leave us a copy of your comments? Leave them with Melissa or something, so
They're in the
part of
packet.
record.
They're in the, yeah.
Were they in here? I did, sorry.
Yep.
Good. Oh, good. Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Well, thank you for coming to in
Thank you
person.
so much. We
Could
really
I-
appreciate it.
Could I ask if there are any ways I could get involved, or I know you mentioned some things, Justine.
Yeah, I think maybe after this
Can I
meeting, you
shoot
could
you
sync up
an
with Justine.
email
She
maybe?
has many ways.
All
She
right.
has many, many ways for you to get involved, and we would love it.
And can I offer like a quick response? I think it's wonderful. I think things are definitely changing from even just when I was growing up, you know, and also just when my parents were moving here. And I think that's lovely to see. I also think that especially youth services are something that I care deeply about, and I think something that should be developed in the future. So just that aspect specifically, and creating spaces, because I see a lot of, especially, I think a lot of the people of color moving into the community are families, and their children are growing up here. So I think that's going to be a growing need. Sorry for the feedback. And I also think that, I think there are a lot of resources for Chinese American folks that are growing in the community. And I am Chinese American, but I also know that there's a lot of folks here who are coming and the numbers are growing, and their identities also deserve to be reflected too. And so I think it's always good to understand the specific demographic needs. Like I know that there's more Vietnamese businesses and Vietnamese folks moving in. There's a lot of other demographics that that I know less about, but are also important to consider. So those are just the thoughts that I had. But thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Can
Does
I
that-
ask that,
Go ahead.
he did offer 3 specific suggestions for strategies, and I don't know if the committee wants to specifically take those up one by one, if you want to add them to the list. So I didn't realize where they were either, but they're, and apparently Alana did this, and I didn't realize she embedded it. I was looking through for the comments. It's in that red line version
Yeah.
of the strategy list. It's the first comment there, and he has 3 specific suggestions. One is creation of a task force reporting to the mayor's office to hear feedback or interface with residents of color about their needs and concerns. The second idea is setting aside funds for youth and teen spaces and programs that are multi-ethnic in nature for promotion of mental and emotional wellness for marginalized youth. And the third is inventory of existing organizations that provide resources for BIPOC folks in Greater Boston and the South Shore, and inviting them to coordinate programming with the town. And I think he's right, he mentioned these are probably most appropriate in the last core theme under public facility services infrastructure.
I think we might have one already that Justine heads, and I mean, if we want to put it in here, does it belong in here as part of this, or?
The one that
It
Justine
exists,
pointed,
we could put
the
it
one
in.
that Justine pointed out talks about the workforce, the town's workforce.
No, I mean, she's the head of it now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I mean, we could add it. It does exist, but do you feel like we need to add it here, is the question?
I mean, for me, diversity perspective is we need to add it in there to make sure there's continuation of the effort, not just that we need it now because election perspective. So.
So what would you say? What is the name of the task force or the committee?
We haven't really have a formal task force. That was the introductions I'm working with the mayor was talking about diversity inclusive task force and diversity empowerment.
So create a diversity, inclusion, and empowerment task force?
Yeah.
Could we add on to that, like also with the, working with the youth?
Yeah, working with the youth development, such as like we had working with the high school, working with the youth, bring in diversity, empowerment programs into the school, and also increasing diversity training within this our town structure, public structure.
And maybe exploring other organizations that offer resources. Would that be right? Is it appropriate to put it all in one?
It doesn't need to be an organization, but we want to make sure that we have that strategy and to, you know, as he say, is empower the diversity for residents to be comfortable to stand up and understand.
Oh, okay. I don't, who raised first? I didn't see. Okay. So, oh, is it just for, Shelley, go ahead.
Appropriate place to put it, but in core theme 5, number 2, where it says create new and improved outdoor adult, family, and youth recreational facilities that are regularly cleaned and maintained, promoting access to recreation areas. Maybe his comment number 2, I think it is, sorry. Maybe we can incorporate it in there if we think that that's appropriate, where we talk about the you know, setting aside funds for youth and teen spaces and programs that are multi-ethnic in nature for promotion of mental and emotional wellness. Maybe that might be a good spot for it. I don't know.
We already have such a facility. Example, the Braintree Art and Culture Community Center. That's where I utilize it. We're looking to have some volunteer to teach Chinese in Saturday. So I have been working with the director
Okay, so
there.
it'd still be part of that
we can
group.
utilize. So Braintree has a lot of resource, but is what we're looking for is the diversity empowerment strategy to promote what's available. For me, just lucky that I know most of people living in Braintree for over 20 years, seeing that my kids graduate from the high school. So I know what resource to tap into, but people that who do not get involved in town does not know what's available. So we're trying to looking at strategy that for diversity empowerment, such as what are the promotion in town available, welcome package to new resident that who's in minority section, and what are the training program available for employees and schools. One example is Braintree High School offer Chinese class, but nobody taking it, and it ended up became a class because they were not introduced and doing elementary school or middle school. So when we only introduce 2 languages, kids that come to the high school age, they want to continue what they learn to be proficiency, but they don't want to pick up in the middle. That type of example.
We also talked about the websites and making them so they can be translated. We did talk about that. I don't know if it's in here, but making it easy for non-English speaking residents to to have access to the website. And so we did talk about translation there. I just don't know that we added it in anywhere.
That was where we're talking about our database, knowledge, information, data banks. I think we had that in somewhere in 5.
Yeah, those are in there. The one that you just mentioned,
It
that's
is in
down
there.
in 5.
Okay, good. Okay.
I don't think, if I may, through the chair, I don't think there's any harm in taking these 3 items that this gentleman has brought to the committee's attention and asking Jen to kind of put together a strategy around that. I can tell you, as a town employee for over 20 years, we need to start to address our population appropriately. I believe that when they enter even town hall, it's a different experience. There's barriers for them. We try to do our best to explain things and to provide clarity, but getting building permits, that's difficult enough when there isn't a language barrier. And I really think that there should be some effort to try to put this into a strategy to try to address our population as it has grown quite a bit over the last two censuses.
So maybe Justine, just because she's been working on this, could work with Jen on that strategy. Does that make sense to everyone?
I just would like to add that Braintree has the Braintree Community Youth Center, which at present is almost on the precipice of failure. It was thriving some years ago, and then it was declining a little, and then COVID hit it very, very hard. And now it's serving about 7 or 8 kids. You know, it's open on Friday nights and Saturday nights from 6 to 9, I believe, and anybody can come. And it's kind of a fun location. I volunteered there several times. There's pizza, there's video games, there's pool, there's foosball, there's ping pong. But it needs a real investment. And I think it would be a really sound area to boost along these lines too, because it's already focused on youth concerns. Mainly, it's a social area, but I think it could be, it has so much potential to be so much more with guidance and cash, which are always hard to come by.
Do you want to come back up to the podium?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the discussion on the points. I think I appreciate, Justine, you were talking about the specific programming. And I think right now it seems to me like there's a lot of disparate, specific, small-scale programs that are in place. Like you mentioned the language program and some of the spaces being open. I think what I was having in mind with my comment was maybe something more in line with what Councilmember Flaherty, I think you mentioned, like having a specific like core space and not specifically just a Chinese American program or something like that, but more of like an open space that's inclusive of people of different ethnic identities too. And I think that's also important. I think having specific resources that target specific populations is important, but I think right now I'm hearing a lot of like different small scale things that are happening, and I think one issue is just having a central kind of like planning principle, or like thinking about like what's the central mission, because the events that you're talking about are really, they sound really amazing, but I know that like one issue is getting publicity for it, because my family has lived here for a very long time, and we haven't heard about many of those events. I think some of them might have gotten started after we had already started like trying to figure out ways to have our needs be met in other ways. And then the youth center is a block or two away from my house actually, and I pass by it a lot, but I never really seen or heard anything about it. I think it would have been a really cool place to see and to have available growing up. But I think it has been in decline for a while. I don't think it was something that I really like saw anything about. But those are just my thoughts. I think definitely you mentioned the task force, and that's something I'm also very interested in learning more about. But I think specifically hearing from residents of color and committing to creating a more centralized plan for all of the different residents of color that live here is something that I would like to see spelled out in that way.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate all your input. Thank you. Okay, so Jen, are you going to work with Justine on trying to get some of those?
Yeah, I'm trying to do it right now, but
While you're doing that,
Yeah.
just to keep things moving, is there any other strategies up for discussion? Okay. Okay, great. Jen, do you want more time to like kind of go back and forth on email with Justine, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that'll
I
probably
think
be
that
the
might be the
best
best
thing,
way
'cause
to
I
make
might
sure
not get the
it
whole thing quite
kind
right,
of
right now.
encompasses
Yeah.
everything. And then
Okay.
you will see it on the website, right? So then we put everything out, so you'll actually be able to see it and know that you contributed in a very meaningful way, so thank you. All right, so would anyone like a motion to end the meeting? Make a motion. Anyone second?
I motion to end the meeting.
Motion to adjourn, and I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye. All right. Anyone opposed? No? Okay. The meeting has ended.
Thank you.
Go in peace.